In this video, we're going to talk about what seasonal adjustment is. Before we do that, one point of emphasis when we talk about seasonal adjustment, it is purely for data against time. So when we're looking at a graph, our independent variable should be time. Along that horizontal axis, you always want to double check to make sure that it is time. Okay, the technical term for this is a line graph. So this, again, this concept of seasonal adjustment, the first thing I'm going to talk about is it applies to line graphs. All right, and in order to truly understand what seasonal adjustment is, we have to understand what the term seasonal variation is, because a seasonally adjusted graph is one that removes seasonal variation. So let's define seasonal variation, and then we'll use this example as an example to explain this concept. So seasonal variation is basically it's a pattern that repeats itself over the course of a year. Okay, so we'll say in this case it's a pattern, and let's generalize that even more than just a year. It's just a pattern that repeats itself in regular intervals. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at our graph over here to the left, and I want you to pay particular attention to what is in red first, okay? And what we're studying here is retail employment. This is made up, but let's say this is employment to retail businesses, and we're comparing that and see what that trend is like from the year 1998 to 2011. Now, chances are, if we're asked to talk about what happened to retail employment from 1998 to 2011, we're not interested in what happens within each year from year to year. In other words, we don't care about the pattern in the short term. We care about the pattern in the long term, especially if that pattern in the short term is pretty much the same year in and year out. For example, let's just zero in on 1998 to 1999. In January, it looks like we have an employment rate of about 14.5 million. All right, notice the reason I'm saying 14.5 million is because this is measured in thousands. So it's not 14,500, rather it's 14,500,000. So it looks like that employment in 1998, beginning of the year, is around 14.5 million. It takes a pretty drastic dip to, we'll say, roughly 14.25 million. And then it goes back up to 14.5 million in the summer, and it kind of plateaus off, and it takes a huge spike as we go from the fall into the new year. Whereas when we finish up at January of 1999, beginning of the new year, we have increased almost, actually practically a million employees. We jump almost from 14.5 mil to 15.5 mil. Okay. Now let's go to another year, and let's not go to the next one. Let's just say we went to, let's say January of 02. Let's see if it follows that same pattern. So January of 02, we're at 15 million roughly, and it dips off from 15 million down to, say, 14.75 million, back up in the summer to 15 mil, goes back down a little bit, and then we see that jump up again, up to 15.5 million. So look at what I just highlighted there. Okay, would you say that is roughly the same pattern? Okay, give or take a little bit, it is. And now let's think conceptually, aside from the graph, how this variable of employment is dependent on the months in the calendar year. Okay, in January, from January to, say, March, let me see if we can try and show this a little bit better. Okay, so January to March, it looks like it's going down. All right, and that makes sense. The colder weather, the winter months, there's probably not as much people buying different things. And then we see it start to go up again. All right, and then in the summer, in the middle of the year, June, July, we see that employment starting to go up, which makes sense. We start seeing the nicer weather, that seasonal effect of, again, we live in New Jersey. If we're going down to the beach, we could see that there's way more employment, especially in Ocean County, Monmouth County, and Atlantic County during that time. And then the biggest change is we see from the end of the year, the last quarter of the year, from say October until December 31st. Okay. And the holiday season would be the biggest influence on that spike in employment. You're starting to see more people shopping, more people going out to buy gifts for the holiday season, so it jumps up. And then it follows this same pattern pretty much throughout, no matter what year you're talking about. And it will most likely continue that pattern for years to come. Now, again, am I interested in that year-to-year pattern, especially if I know it happens year in and year out? The answer is no. Okay. Rather, I'm interested in what happens in the big picture. Okay, and that's this blue line, which I'm going to trace here in yellow. All right. This data is going to show, or this line is a line that is seasonally adjusted. Okay. In other words, it has taken out the seasonal variation. So let me just write that off to the side here. We'll say a seasonal adjustment is a line graph that has removed seasonal variation. Now we can start to look at the big picture, all right? We can start to look at the real reason as to why employment is increasing or decreasing, okay? So let's look at that line and let's try and analyze it. 1998, we say our employment is roughly at 14.5 million. Then it jumps up to about, we'll say almost 15.5 million in January of 01. And we see a dip here in January of 04. Okay. The biggest change in this is right after 2008. It tapers off a lot. It drops a lot. And let me actually try and highlight that in pink. Okay. So from January of 08 until January of about 10, which we just highlighted there. That's probably the real reason I want to look at this graph, is I want to try and explain what's going on right there. Forget what's happening in the calendar months. Forget what's happening in the summer seasons, the holiday season. I could care less. But what happens there from 2008 to 2010, all right? And we saw our recession, okay? The stock market crashed. All right, we'll say the stock market crashed in 2008. All right, and that could explain why that retail employment has gone down from 2008 to 2010. Okay, so hopefully this video makes some more sense as to what a seasonal adjustment is and why it's needed in line graphs.